Hey, so I wanted to cover something that I built out this past week, prompting and also just reading through code and the architecture. A lot of us have skill files spread out between different documents. We typically have them spread out in different repositories, and it all just seemed a bit too much, along with the fact that like our agent files are like in every other repo. And I just thought architecturally, this is not really the best choice, especially if we're just copying files over from one repository into another, having to implement the changes. And long term, I'm just like, no, we need something a little bit better, centralized. So let me cover the architecture real quick, and then I'll cover what was built out for it. So currently, if you're using AI in some kind of capacity, we're using skill files in different documents. So we're having 1, 2, 3 different types of skills, and then we have like an agent file that has access to these skills. And then what you're doing typically is that you're moving it from one repository or one folder into another. And what ends up happening is, hey, here's one agent. Oh, we made a new agent for this other thing, or we gave it an extra skill set that it's able to use. A skill is basically a tool that it's able to use. That way, you are not using as many contexts for our documentation. So what ends up happening is like when these it depends on like your editor of choice or your IDE, but what ends up happening is that it ends up collecting all these files and sending it over into your LLM as part of the context window, and this kind of like fills it up as far as like your token resources. So it's a lot of tokens being sent over, and then what your LLM ends up doing is ends up taking these, saying, oh, we need to use this sub agent, or the user's telling me to use this agent with these skill sets. The problem is, say you have not only just this one agent, but you also have another set of agents that you're not going to use altogether. This is still clogging up your LLM, and it's a bit annoying. So that's just instead of one repository. So you copy this whole problem. All you're doing is just making this a bigger problem, because say you have a really cool agent that you've built out and you have to share with a coworker. You're just thinking to yourself, all right, well, this isn't really gonna go over well, especially if I have to send over each of these different files over to my coworker. So what I ended up doing was thinking architecturally about this, and putting it behind an MCP as the gateway. I'll show what this is doing in the backend, but connecting a SQLite database to it. And instead of all these agent files being files in themselves, we can version them and put them inside the database itself. So I run a sync job. Whenever I open up a repository, I can run the CLI tool, sync it, and now what ends up happening inside of Claude, Gemini, or whatever tool that I decide to have, they reach out to the MCP. Is like, hey, do you have any tool available that, say, covers regex or something to that effect? The MCP goes and runs like a word comparison for that tooling inside the SQLite database and says, yeah, I have this one, returns it, and then we can implement it. What I recently did for testing wise, I have like a methodology that I built out for auditing code, because I didn't want to have to repeat it every time that I brought it out. I would just run my LLM prompter and tell it, hey, I have a skill set inside of this MCP server that it's called Spiker. It's like an auditing skill. Go grab it and then audit the changes that we made, ensuring that like we follow the correct objects. And it ends up grabbing it from the database and returning it, and then like it just returns like a small snippet. So like token wise or context wise, it's just saying, hey, this is the preloaded bit, just a description. And then like the model itself says, hey, are you cool with me going and grabbing this tool set? And so we tell it yes, confirming it inside of our host application. And what we confirm it via that, or via Pi, or via whatever harness that you guys are basically using for this. So we just confirm that it can be able to use it. It goes and grabs it, and then ends up returning it. So we don't have to fill up as much context windows. It's just small little JSON parameters, so it's a smaller amount. We're not sending in an entire payload of all the agents, all the skill sets. Instead, we're having like an MCP server that hosts all of these files inside of it, inside of a SQLite database, which is super small and super fast. So what ends up happening is this thing returns to our host application with the entry inside of our database, and then host application runs it, runs the audit, it reaches back out to the LLM model that you're using, and ends up like no longer having to use as much context like tokens as you probably are currently using, as well as like you also I added the option to be able to export the database and then send it over to coworkers or whatever. So it's super easy to share skills and agents, and it's no longer you're having to do this whole copy paste, send over this, oh look, I made a new agent. Instead, anytime that you make like an update to a markdown file and you sync it to the actual MCP server, it's no longer an issue. And then the underlying build for this, I used Rust. So it's a super small binary. You don't have to be worried about this. I know, I feel like there are other tools available out there for this, or at least attempting to do this. I did it in Rust because it's a small binary. It's super easy to be able to handle all the changes, and then I posted it up on GitHub, completely open source. You guys are free to go use it. And then I also added all the documentation on like how to implement it. It's as easy as just copying it, opening up a terminal window, and then entering it and letting it download. And then here are all the function calls for it. So run the MCP. All I did because I use anti-gravity at the moment as my main IDE is just I linked it up to here. It calls it via standard IO. It grabs it, and it's pretty fast. So all right, I also just realized that I didn't show you guys this tool. So let's just open up a new window. It's like, hey, I want to see what skills are available from the skills CLI MCP server. Are you able to grab Spiker from it? So behind the case, or behind like the actual MCP server is running in the background, or we'll be able to see. Okay, so see, it's gonna go over to your skill engine. It's gonna say skill search. We're gonna allow it. You can always allow in the project or allow always. It was able to go grab it. Here's the Spiker one that I was talking about. And then we're going to allow it another time. You know what? I'm just going to say always allow. It goes and grabs it. And here's the full markdown file for you. On the skills, when I tried querying the server for a full list of people, the skill engine database returned an error, so I couldn't. Okay, so I'll have to go look at this. But regardless, it's able to find it by asserted name. And this is one of the markdown skill files that I had created for auditing code. Say you have a folder, you run the sync command, it scans a folder of all your MD skill files, upserts them into it, and then if you need to export it, you can also run export items.md sync compatible into a directory. And I did want to, I did this like yesterday where I added usage metrics because I wanted to see which one of my skills I'm typically using or my agents are typically using. We do have usage metrics inside of the application as well. But overall, all the information's available. I have it available on my GitHub. I'll link it down below. I want to see what you guys think about the tool. But this should help with clutter. I hate clutter. So, yeah. Really quickly, I did have on the bottom part, I just realized that I had this on here. You can execute what they look like, the commands look like, and what it'll send out to you. So here's the request, here's what usually your host application is sending over, and this is the response. And you could always update it, and then you can also run async. But I have all the binaries for all the different builds, and you guys should be good to go.